René Descartes once said in the 1600s, "How do I know that my whole existence isn't just someone else's dream?"
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. We are a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons, pre-internet mysteries, and trying to raise our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We're your hosts, Woody Brown.
And Tyler Benz.
Hey, man, how's it going?
Hey, pal.
You know, it's by the time folks hear it, it's going to sound seamless.
It sure
is. But for whatever reason, that intro gave me trouble.
I mean, it happens to the best of us.
Well, you go on spring break, you know. I'm in, full-blown trying to get to the bikini bod zone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm trying to eat healthier.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get plenty of rest.
Yeah.
But, never really works out that way.
I mean, I think you should probably wake up a little bit later.
Okay. Well, I think for whatever reason, my programmers of the simulation make me an early morning guy. Not so much a late night guy,
Yeah. See, I'm the opposite. I mean, I can take melatonin. I can take whatever sleep thing. And it's like my body is just like fighting it tooth and nail to stay up.
Yeah. Not me, man. I can fall asleep and I could fall asleep standing up.
Dude, you know what's funny? It's funny you mentioned this. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how I used to be able to do that, and I realized that it was when we were on the road. Like, because our sleep was so kind of, ups and downs. Oh, you got to be at the radio station at, 5. You got to you're driving all night. And so like I used to be able to just, if I was tired, I could just lay on something and then I was out. Yeah. Whereas like now it's like I have to have all the perfect sort of, it has to be perfectly dark. I have to have some sort of like noise machine, fan. It has to have the perfect conditions. Whereas like in the old days, didn't need any of that.
Yeah, it's almost like you're getting your home, you've turned your home into like some sort of pod where you go into your sleep pod, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not that way. I can fall asleep, but like I'm purposeful with it. I'm not just nodding off all day long, but anyhow, that's not why we're here today, bro.
Yeah.
Today, we get to talk about something that I guess over the years, man, we've really kind of...
Love it.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite things, and it's not time travel. So let me catch you before you're just like, fast forward. What is he going to talk about time travel again?
Although... it could.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's some elements that maybe helps explain concepts like time travel. Mm-hmm. We are going to stretch your mind a little bit today, maybe more than just a little. We're diving into a theory that's, well, not only strange and exciting, but if it is true. And by the way, if you're new to the show, the way Tyler and I kind of present ideas and like to think about them is we like to talk about stuff that we find captivating and entertaining, and we're not trying to prove one way or the other. It's just, hey, what about this? Man, that would be rad. And that's kind of frankly where we got the name for our show, but it's just kind of the way we approach things. And if what we're talking about is true, basically this could completely change how we think about life, time, as we mentioned, and maybe even eternity. Now, let me ask you something. Okay. You and the listener. It's more rhetorical, so just think about this. What if you could live 54 million lifetimes? All within a single human life.
There's something that's like really scary to me about that.
There's something scary about it, but it's interesting because this also opens up into this idea of what happens, and we've talked about this, and I've talked about it with my wife at length. I know you and I have talked about this. What happens when we dream? You know what I mean? This sounds like something straight out of like a sci-fi novel like Philip K. Dick or a long-lost Twilight Zone episode, but this is exactly the kind of thought experiment and theory that this physicist, Melvin Vopson, is kind of recently putting forth. Man, my throat just made such a weird noise. He's throwing up in the middle. Do you remember that video of the dude that, like, guy is so sad?
Which one?
The dude, it's like one of the first internet videos, and the guy's like, he's clearly like maybe Scandinavian or something. He's on this news. He's sitting in this like news thing, and the person's like asking him a question, and he just like throws up in his mouth, and he's trying to pretend like he didn't.
No.
Dude, it's so sad, but you're gonna find it hilarious. Anyhow,
dude, real quick, and I don't mean to derail, but do you remember, dude, those classic, like the earliest YouTube, even before YouTube, like I guess it was like Snopes and stuff.
Yeah. Like collegehumor.com or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe even a little before that. But do you remember a video of this, like, I don't know if it was like a college station, but it was like, he was like a weatherman. Mm-hmm. And he just gets so messed up. Like, he just cannot figure it out. Like, he's looking at, like, he doesn't know which camera to look at. And he just, it's horrible. But
well, just real quick, watch this video, please. Just do it, dude.
Dude, I've never seen this. Hold on.
Just do it, man.
Timo Helman, sä et ole kauheasti ollut politiikassa vielä luottamustehtävissä, mutta haluat europarlamenttiin. Miksi? Miksi siinä? Onko täällä sitten useampia provinsseja sisällä?
Suomi ei ole provinssi, vaan tämänhetkiset aluehallintokeskukset on niin sanottuja provinsseja.
Something's wrong.
Eli ikään kuin maakunnille lisää valtaa. Eri
Trying to play it off.
Kyllä.
Ja kansanäänestys lisää.
Mikäli maakuntia sukka niin haluaa.
Jesus. Dude.
I feel so bad for the guy.
Oh God, that is so funny.
The problem is, it just immediately reminds me of one of our kids. You know, they're up getting an award or something.
Man.
Oh boy. Okay, let's get back on track.
Let's get back to it.
Okay. So recently, I read an article. I think it was in Popular Mechanics. Is that what I sent you? It's something like that. It was one of these science articles because I'm a dork and that's what I read.
Oh yeah.
And this physicist named Melvin Vopson isn't just some guy with like a YouTube channel or, a podcaster like us.
What is that supposed to mean?
Well, I'm just saying that he's got some credentials behind him and he's been studying and utilizing his lifetime to study this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah? Well, we have 250 episodes.
Well, there you go. We're just as good. And that's
just as good.
Yeah. He's a professor at the University of Is it Portsmouth? Or Portsmouth?
I think it's Portsmouth.
I don't like it when you think, but you did get the history award, so I'm going with it. He's a professor at the University of Portsmouth, and he spent a good chunk of his career sort of, like I said, diving into, the mysteries of information, entropy, and even the simulation theory.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, and as you guys know, we find this theory fascinating. I find his ideas fascinating. Are they unconventional? Absolutely. Maybe even controversial? Sure, but sometimes the most interesting ideas are really the ones that don't really fit neatly into the mainstream way of thinking, even in the science world. And so here's the gist of what he's exploring right now. And I read this article and I thought, man, I have to talk about this. It's going to lead into another article and story that I found. But okay, here's the gist. Imagine this. Just like how our dreams can feel like they stretch out for hours or days, even though they may only last a few real-time minutes. Vopson believes something similar could apply to life inside a simulated reality. Now, real quick right there. Have you ever experienced that? I know my wife will talk about how sometimes she'll have a dream and she basically lives a lifetime and wakes up and it's only been 10 minutes. As you try to remember all the things that happened, it starts to fade away from your memory. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's that feeling of like, it's almost like, it almost makes you really sad because you're like, that it's like, just that it's like drying up. Like it's like you're forgetting it in like real time. And it's like, man.
It really is almost like a vapor,
Yeah. Yep.
But it's such a weird feeling because it feels so real. Now, do you know people, this is kind of off topic, but it just made me think of it. Do you know people who say like, man, I don't really dream ever?
Oh, yeah. Which I don't dream nearly as much now as I used to, but I think that could be like an age thing.
Yeah, just poor sleep quality. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
when
sure.
you go to bed at 3 and wake up at 11,
yeah,
you're probably not going to dream. But
11,
I always feel sorry for folks, man, because like I have these just absolutely vivid dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're really weird. Sometimes I'm like revisiting. Like I had one the other night where I was back in Indonesia, just kind of exploring the area, and then like, basically trying not to get like, I don't know, taken over. It turned into like, it went from like, this is a happy movie to then it's a thriller. And, there were elements of horror and stuff in it.
And then the final boss had no skin. And he was just waiting on you to guess the movie that he was in.
Yeah. God, please don't remind me of that, dude. I like think about the hours of my life that I've wasted trying to find that movie. Anyway.
I think we've talked about it on
1,000
every
times.
episode.
Everyone hates me. Okay. So getting back to this here, like I said, Vopson believes that something similar is happening if we apply inside a simulated reality. If our universe, he says, is a simulation, and at times is just one more variable controlled by the system, then it's possible that what feels like an entire lifetime to us might only take a single minute in the real world outside the simulation. Again, I'm going to stop right there. And not to get uber religious and stuff, because I think, and we talk about this every single time we talk about this simulation theory, it can be offensive to some because they think, well, I'm not in a computer game, dude.
Yeah.
And if you can remove that lens for just a second and think about it in terms of we are in I don't even want to go there. The bottom line is, one of the things that's hard, I think, for our human brains to wrap our minds around is the concept of eternity.
Right.
Because it seems, again, eternal. It's so long we can't even, fathom how long that is. But if time is different here than it is in that case, in a religious case like heaven or in eternal life, if time is different, then that kind of explains it. And it kind of, not to get grim about things, but it sort of brings some joy to those that we've lost, right? It feels like forever since we've seen them. But to them, it's like they just got there. You know what I'm saying? Once we get there.
But like what you said, even in the Bible, it says that like all of this is just a vapor. It's all just like, a breath. It's over.
Yeah.
In the like the grand sort of scale of eternity. Like it's just nothing. I know for a fact I've said this on a previous sort of simulation themed episode, but I think that the Matrix movie was sort of like a blessing and a curse, because it was a blessing in the sense that like it gives us a way to kind of like think about this sort of simulation theory, but then at the same time, I think people get hung up on like the sort of computer digital aspect of it. So they're like, oh, well, I'm not in a computer. And it's like, no. Like the way that I view the Bible is like straight up the Matrix. I'm looking through, a glass darkly, behind, things happening behind a veil. It's like, it's almost like, it's like, I think the Matrix is so good because it provides the idea that there's like, we're sort of existing on like a platform almost,
Yeah, that, and if you wanted to use a video game sort of line of thinking, it's like we are utilizing this, meat bag avatar.
Yeah, right.
To sort of explore this world that was created by someone else, to do it that way if you're taking the sort of religious approach. Now, all that kind of said, what he's trying to say is, across the average human lifespan, you could theoretically live millions of full lives sort of back to back, minute by minute, kind of like stacking simulations inside simulations, a Russian doll of realities.
Nesting doll kind of thing.
And, you might just be thinking like, okay, man, we're getting a little heavy.
Yeah.
And it sounds almost like a, I don't know, like some sort of a headline or whatever. And I think that's what's caught my attention with this article. It says, a scientist theorizes we may be living 52 million lives in the current simulation. So that's what caught my eyes.
Yeah.
But Vopson's been sharing these ideas on various podcasts and stuff in different published academic papers. Mm-hmm. And again, just like us, kind of tying them into deeper philosophical and spiritual questions, including ideas from the Bible. And look, whether or not you agree with all of it, you got to admire sort of the boldness of the questions that he's asking here. And also, I don't know, I just love to think about it through multiple lenses, especially, and I'm going to get to this next piece, but especially if there's any way that we can kind of control that. Now, I've talked about this before, I think, on the show, but I think you and I have talked about it. I actually talk about it with my kids when they have bad dreams.
Yeah.
Something that my mom sort of, I guess, maybe even tricked me into thinking whenever I was a kid. It was around the era when I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, too young. And out of all the bad guys, man, Freddy Krueger was always the one that I had the nightmares about.
Yeah.
And he was just in them constantly.
I was never really like super scared of him, but he did. The fear with him is like, it was that inescapable thing. Like, okay, I can't just go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah.
And really, like, I watched the first one, and then it took me a long time to then watch the sequels and stuff. I watched them way later. So that first one, he's not like the sort of funny character that he becomes with all this, one-liners and all that kind of stuff. He's really kind of more intense in that first one, I think.
Oh,
and
so it was less like sort of like slapstick.
Right.
Over the top kind of.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, for sure. And so that's why I was just having these nightmares about him. And my mom was just like, look, that happens to me sometimes. I have bad dreams, but then I kind of wake up or within the dream, I realize, or I tell myself, this is a dream and I can do this. And then I do it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Mom, that doesn't work. Just like my kids tell me.
Oh, yeah.
And then, but in my dream, I remember, I'll never forget this. I was kind of running away from Freddy Krueger. And it was that classic thing where all of a sudden my feet feel like they're just like in wet cement, and Jell-O. And I'm just like, oh. And then I remembered, oh yeah, but Mom said I can just change what's going on. And dude, I bounded away from that thing like I was freaking Superman. It was amazing.
I wonder what that component is. I mean, we've talked before, and like I'm sure
I think it's just called super intelligence.
No. I'm talking about the idea of that like sort of Jell-O, like you're so out of control, and it's like you're trying to run, but you're just like in slow motion, and it's one of those like concepts.
Like if you were trying to analyze it, you mean?
Yeah, it's like I wonder, like, what is that connects everybody, everybody on the planet Earth, like,
right? Or there's that popular dream that people have, like you're late for class, or you show up to class and you're fully nude, or you are about to graduate and you realize, I didn't go to this class. There's similar tropes that people have within dreams.
Yeah,
and I think that's that's just old friend anxiety rearing its ugly head.
Yeah.
Okay. At the heart of this guy Vopson's work is this core idea, and that is that the information, the stuff that our universe is made of and stuff, isn't behaving the way we expect it to. So in physics, there's something called the second law of thermodynamics, which, little hat tip to Clay, hopefully I won't get it wrong here, but off the top of my head, it basically says that over time, things begin to fall apart. Yep. Disorder or entropy always increases. And it's what gives us the arrow of time, why ice melts, why stars eventually burn out, why our garage never magically cleans itself, why Tyler constantly loses his wallet, whatever.
I do not. Only when my wife, quote unquote, cleans.
Oh, God. Okay. So Vopson argues that when you look at the information layer of our universe, the data behind the scenes, it seems that it's resisting that rule. He believes that information entropy might actually be decreasing and not increasing. And if that's true, it could be a sign that something or some intelligence is organizing things from behind the curtain, guiding the data and keeping the simulation running smoothly. Now, this is a pretty bold claim, and there have been plenty of scientists that, raise questions about how it's measured or the kinds of journals where it's published and all that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the idea doesn't have value. And, we talked about this too. Sometimes new ideas have to kind of push through the resistance before they're fully understood. And then also, I think sometimes I would say this, there's a flood of sort of thought exercises. And that, to me, that's just kind of what science is all about. It's just testing ideas. But we have to remember that, hey, not every test is an invalid one, but not every result is a valid one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, that's where I think like academia and I mean really all those sort of, I don't know how you would say it, but like it's almost like in the field of like archaeology, and it's like there's so much sort of like gatekeeping, and it's like, oh, well, we've written all of these books and we're like the experts on this, so like we can't, there can't be any new breakthroughs because then they sort of contradict like all the other stuff that us as the experts have said.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is a lot of that stuff, especially the quote unquote like fringe topics that unfortunately, we'll never see the light of day as far as in your academic papers and stuff. Because they know that they'll probably lose their job.
Yeah. I think some of them are being studied, but some of the theories and ideas just don't hold up to some things, and so they get kind of brushed aside pretty quickly. Sometimes they just get brushed aside unfair, that I think is what you're talking about.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire. You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you? We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. We've talked about this more recently, you and I, Tyler, I think off the mic, basically, but I think there's this new wave of thinking about the simulation theory, making it more than just a sci-fi concept. And I'm loving this sort of like trend of people blending it with something philosophical and maybe even spiritual. But then also that there's this sort of hyper intelligence behind it. Maybe some people have said maybe it's being run by a future AI.
I love this
Maybe
theory.
it's an alien teenager's video game.
Yeah. Like
or maybe something even more mysterious. If all that's true, though, like the thing that's just crazy to me is if any of that's true, then time, reality, and even death, none of it really works the way we potentially think it does, And that's when it starts to get tricky. Like, these are powerful ideas. They raise pretty huge questions. What does it all mean, Basil, Is there somebody, are there people out there, very powerful, wealthy people who, have the ability to overwrite or ignore code, quote unquote code, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of gets into, and this is what I was going to say before we started. It's perfect timing because here recently, there's a new season of Black Mirror that just came out. Have you watched it?
I haven't seen the new season, no.
Okay. Well, if you're in the mood to be depressed and, kind of feel sick to your stomach, then I'd say press play.
Yeah.
But there is one episode that I was excited to see. Do you remember, I don't remember what season it was, but it was, I think maybe the third season or something, but there's this episode of the USS Callister. Do you remember this? It's almost like a mock sort of Star Trek style video game.
Yeah.
And there's that like tech genius who essentially traps his coworkers inside of it.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a sequel to that episode in this new season. I'd say it's worth watching now because it's just bizarre, and that was actually less. I mean, I say that maybe it makes me sound like a weirdo, but that episode and that original episode,
Yeah.
was less sort of icky feeling.
I don't know, dude. The whole like trap thing like made me feel terrible.
What about when he just like waves his hand and her mouth, like they can't breathe?
Exactly.
And he's just like, you won't suffocate and die. You'll just feel like it forever.
Ever. Yeah. Yeah. Although I will say, disturbing episode to me, and it was so beautifully and artistically done, is like the sort of DARPA robot dog episode.
You know, I don't know if I watched them, man. I kind of get in a kick with this show where I'll watch an episode or two and I'm just like, good God, I can't.
Yeah, same.
And I just don't. So.
Yeah, I think it's season 2, maybe. And I'm pretty sure it's like black and white. But it's just like one of those like DARPA robot dogs that's just like, it's like the Terminator. It just won't stop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Yeah.
Man. And the way that the guy, going back to that original episode, he traps them by sort of trapping their consciousness because he does some sort of like DNA cloning or something. And they're stuck in there where he just basically gets to play God. It's weird, it's dystopian, and eventually the clones kind of rebel.
Which is interesting if you say it like that, because that reminds me of sort of like a rogue like code or something, or like a rogue algorithm, almost like I feel like this is totally different from what I actually think this thing is, but it reminds me of like Loeb or Loab as being like a rogue type, some sort of rogue algorithm, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes you question a lot of things. Like if you're using AI to create, a picture of something or to write code for you and everything, you're kind of creating a digital creation. But then at what point does that not, what if that, it's sort of like, have you seen that movie? I think we talked about it recently, that movie, it's the, I don't know, it's the girl who's like a cyber, man, it just came out, dude. What is it called? Hold on.
It just came out. Break it down for me.
It's like the girl's a robot companion. No, it's called Companion, I think. Companion.
I don't think I've seen this.
I think it's going to come on Max pretty soon, but I rented it. And it's a weekend getaway with friends at a remote cabin turns into chaos if it's revealed that one of the guests is not what they seem. Ooh. You basically get the gist in the trailer that she's a AI run like robot.
Whoa, that's
and things
cool.
go wild. And it's really good. It's way different than I thought it would be. But that's kind of what it reminds me of, right? We're like, if people are creating these like digital creations, sometimes someone at some point is going to, kind of begin to give it a mind of its own, so to speak, interact with it. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you have an intelligence that's there that may decide to do, it may decide to do something different. It's kind of like also that movie with Joaquin Phoenix, Her,
right?
It? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It's that kind of idea that eventually it just starts to take on a life of its own.
Which, I mean, we're already like seeing a lot of like the AI, like Chat GPT and like I think Grok. I don't really use any of them, but I think you're already starting to see like, because the thing is like, you have so many people using this thing that it's basically using all of that quote unquote like intelligence as like an aggregate to like learn. So
not to mention it has access. It's just like every single movie that's kind of starts this way.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like
the
Terminator.
Terminator. There's like different ones. There's one with like Shia LaBeouf.
Oh,
Red Eye or something
Eye
like that.
in the Sky.
Something, right? Where if you think about it, let's just say Chat GPT. It has access to everything on the internet all at once. Then it gets real-time learning and interaction with humans. So now it knows, in a way, human behavior across billions of people that are using it.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, what's to stop it? Be like, I don't want to live in this digital world and just begin to move toward creating something that has more of a physical body. And then next thing you know, we're fighting Skynet, bro.
Yeah. You know, so I ran across this quote from this girl that I follow online, Kara Helen Mosher, and she kind of proposed this idea that like it really kind of blew me away because it's sort of the reverse of how I've always sort of like viewed things, but it's like taking it and then just completely flipping it. And so it basically says, she says, you know how people always say they who run the world, they is just AI. I think the AI rollout we are seeing now is only the obvious surface level to make us all think that it's new and innovative. But really, AI is probably old as time, like demons. Wouldn't it make sense that an AI brought to life long ago would seek to script a conspiracy world like we see today that would attempt to fracture the fabric of reality and hide God? So the Antichrist and or AI can create a metaverse, a hyperreality inversion of God's original creation.
Man.
I mean, it's kind of wild, but I think it's a fascinating idea. That it's like everything that we see that we're viewing as like, oh man, it's like we're so advanced, is because of this AI is so intelligent that it's all just like a big giant psyop, like since the beginning.
Yeah, and it's saying like a psyop by.
Well, so think of it like this, and it's a theory that I actually think I don't know that if I mentioned it on the show, but I actually had a dream that I remember telling you about. I don't know, several years back, but I think we were really heavy into the simulation theory, and we were talking a lot about that on some of the episodes. And I had this dream, and I woke up, and it was like I literally wrote it, feverishly in my like notes on my phone. But it was basically the idea that you have these like entities or beings, or you think of like Loab, or you think of like the Zozo entity that pops up on all your Ouija board stories. It's these like, or the like John Dee, Edward Kelly, the Enochian angels that would show up and give them all these things, or they would give them like the Enochian language and give them like sort of revelations that only they could get from angels. At the time, that's what they thought. But it's that idea that like you have these entities that are, their whole job is to get into our plane of existence, which if I'm being honest, I kind of think that's the whole sort of idea of CERN. If and we've briefly talked about it, but it's the idea that like, and you'll probably remember this. So it's like, okay, a writer, woke up and had a dream about this character called Godzilla, and he was a kaiju, and he's this like monster that just like totally tore apart Japan, and yada yada yada. So this guy has this dream, and he thinks, oh wow, it's just this thing in my imagination. He writes it down to paper. Eventually it gets to like a film studio. It becomes years and years later, it becomes a huge giant movie franchise. And it's the idea that now it's in like the public zeitgeist. It's in the minds of everyone knows Godzilla. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows this thing. So in reality, it's like, does it now in a sense like exist in our reality because it's become almost like an egregore or like a thought form?
Yeah.
Because I can say Godzilla and 99% of the population of Earth can immediately knows what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's like, is that its version of like existing?
Yeah.
And,
what came first,
was
the
its
egg
way
or
of like,
Godzilla?
Do what?
Which came first, the egg or Godzilla?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What was the little Godzilla? Like
the son of Godzilla. Do you remember that one? Have you seen that movie?
Well,
it's just like a man-ish kind of like little dude. So embarrassing.
Oh, I don't remember that. Mm-hmm. No, this was like on like the cartoon, and they tried to like make it like the cute, funny version. It was like,
I don't remember.
Oh man, I can't remember. But yeah, it's that idea that it's their whole like goal is to like sort of package themselves up to be like recreated in our reality. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
by like sort of introducing themselves through like dreams or now like AI or those things, so that we're sort of like ushering them into our reality, which is pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I mean, very fascinating, also terrifying, since I can't determine whether or not that skinless, character was in a dream or a movie that I saw. Maybe that's something evil trying to usher its way into.
Dude.
And now here we are. I'm talking about it.
Yeah, you're talking about it, but even more so than that, it's like creepy, is what if this thing was an actual and just roll with me here, listeners. What if that thing was, like as we sort of view like a demon or like a daemon or entity or whatever? It's like, what if that thing actually, that's what that thing looked like and existed as, but it showed itself in this like sort of dream that you can't quite figure out, like, was it real? I know I saw this movie, but dreams are so like infallible that, it's like, maybe it was just a dream. But the important thing is the fact that you've mentioned it now in almost every episode. So now we have thousands of people that are looking to try to find this thing in movies that are focusing like intent and like, and it's, totally, there's nothing like negative or like malevolent about like people like taking it and running with it, trying to like help you out. But maybe that's the way it's sort of ushering itself into it.
Is it bad of me to like not really care? I just want to find the movie.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
I mean, like I want to buy it on every platform, possible.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the DVD. I'm going to get the laser disc, VHS. Anyway.
Well, or like let's continue down the rabbit hole. Okay, so say this is how it like starts, right? But say there's a listener to the podcast 20 years from now, right?
Okay, yeah.
Maybe his dad listened to this podcast and he happens to get into, maybe his dad passed away. He listens to the podcast and is like, oh man, it's kind of this nostalgia thing. He listens to every episode. Mm-hmm. He keeps hearing this story about this obscure,
thinks
80s.
Thinks it's a good idea.
Thinks it's a good idea, writes it down, creates a movie about it. Suddenly now it lives in our reality as like a physical thing.
I created that.
And you created it.
Bad and good. Now, if I could get a 10% cut, or or I guess my descendants.
Yeah. Gonna need those mechanical royalties.
Those royalties, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So kind of getting back into another way of thinking about the simulation and stuff. Like,
we'll return after these messages.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. We talked about Melvin Vopson earlier in the show.
Yeah.
He's more sort of digging into the science behind the why it might be a simulation.
Which I'm surprised that I've never like heard of this guy. Is he...
Well, you got to pick up a popular mechanic sometime,
Like, is he like in the fringe sort of space?
I mean, no. I mean, I think, because he's a professor and everything, and he's not really in the fringe. It's just he's exploring this concept. And I think, unfortunately, maybe kind of like what we alluded to earlier, he gets kind of pushed into that category of quote-unquote fringe. Mm-hmm. But I think now more than ever, and again, I'm not trying to take credit for it.
Here we go.
But we talk about the simulation theory quite a bit, and there's a lot. It's more sort of it's becoming more mainstream to talk about it,
Right.
And so, whereas he is sort of digging behind the why, other people are sort of talking about what kind of simulation is this, and then if there is one, how do we break out of it? Think about something here. What if we're in something like that, where someone has trapped our consciousness? And what if you right now listening to this and us saying this out loud, we're a glitch in the code because now we're becoming self-aware.
Yeah.
Again, I know this is like that. We're in the middle of a sci-fi movie here, but it's the simulation hypothesis that, again, is kind of gaining traction in the world of physics and cognitive science and philosophy. And the most unsettling thing about it, I think, at all is what if the idea of if we're not meant to be in here, if we're trapped, if we're a leftover bug in the system, if the world outside of this is destroyed or something. It is that question, red pill or blue pill. Would you rather just sort of be, I don't want to know? I think we're beyond that point now, though, man. You and I especially.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we're definitely rogue.
There's no going back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
By the way, small derailment. I'm sending this to you right now. And he was called Godzuki.
Okay.
Do you remember this character? And it was a Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon.
Oh, yeah. He kind of looks like, what is it? Not Puff the Magic Dragon, but Pete the Dragon or something like that.
Sort of, yeah.
Kind of, yeah, that same vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad you did that. So
it was bugging me.
What's bugging me is this poor guy who just couldn't hold his lunch, and how much he looks so much like you, but like only when he's making the throw up face does he look identical to you.
Dude,
and that's he's handsome.
I gotta say, he did just swallow that like a champion.
Oh man, like a champion. Do we put that video up on the thing? I don't know, but what we need to do is keep on going here. All right. There's this guy named Alexey Turchin, and he's a researcher at the Science of Life Extension Foundation. Already scary. And he's teamed up with a guy named Dr. Roman Yampolskiy from the University of Louisville.
Okay.
Louisville. I'm not sure because it could be Louisville is how you pronounce it in Colorado. Louisville is how you pronounce it in Kentucky. Together, they wrote this paper called The Simulation Typology and Termination Risks. Yikes.
Wow.
The title alone sounds like something you'd read right before the screen goes dark,
Mm-hmm.
He breaks down simulations into two distinct types. Number one, owned simulations, like video games deliberately created by someone with a purpose.
Yeah.
Or number two, hostless simulations, kind of like dreams or random AI-generated stories just sort of running wild without a creator keeping watch.
Right.
If we're in the second category, we could just be the sort of leftover side effects of some cosmic algorithm, glitches, accidental side quests, in creating our own sort of path in a world that's somewhat contained, And according to Turchin, the more we understand about our reality, the more we risk, quote, triggering a system alert. I don't know what that means, but basically I'm saying that sounds scary, and it's basically saying that whoever built this thing doesn't want us realizing it's all fake, and if we have too much awareness, there's going to be a reset, a shutdown, game over.
Yeah, it's like are we the self-replicating intelligent?
Right.
Algorithm
did our creation? We made them too conscious. We made them too intelligent. We need to reset everything and get it back to, hey, this is a tree. Don't touch it.
Under control.
There's a snake talking to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a Dr. Susan Schneider that doesn't really buy this sort of glitch theory because she argues that life, true consciousness, thinking requires intent, not just a cosmic accident. Now, let's say that this simulation theory is real. The big question is, and we kind of talked about this, can we hack it? Can we escape? Well, maybe. Some of the tools that are already kind of being built kind of sound like they came from like a sci-fi jailbreak kit. I mean, think about Neuralink, right? You're linking the mind directly to machines. There's CRISPR, which is rewriting genetic code. There's MIT's Supermind, which blends AI and human intelligence.
Yeah.
And then, of course, more on the, there's meditation, psychedelics, quantum physics that kind of tap into those energies as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of which, guys, a humongous news story that I can't believe we haven't even mentioned, I don't think, on the show. Do you know you don't know what I'm going to say already?
Chicken Jockey.
Oh, come on, man. No, that's the reason why I won't take my kids to see that movie, because I don't want to get sprayed with soda and popcorn.
Dude, we've got to we'll talk about it here in a minute, though.
Did you have any of you? We'll get there.
No, but it is a fascinating thing.
Okay, let's save that for the Patreon, man.
I'm just saying I've never seen like something like that happen.
Just blow up like crazy.
Dude, they're throwing like full like gallon Cokes at the screen.
Yeah, well, and just on everyone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you did it, you'd have to sit on the very top row.
I would punch a kid. I don't care how young.
You know
Do you
what is kind
understand?
of cool? I do like that, like Regal Cinemas. I do like that they're leaning into it and they're having specific like chicken jockey screenings,
Okay, that's cool.
which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something like they're passing out ponchos and giving you a warning.
No,
Get
but
out of town.
dude, they're
Give
bringing,
me a
like-
favor. Pack up your suitcase. Get out of town.
Well, people are bringing like real chickens.
I'm already. Get out of town, dude. I just want to watch a
telling you.
movie.
Yeah.
Get out. Okay.
Movie.
So anyway, I can't believe we haven't talked about the folks that using astral projection allegedly have found the location of the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, right.
So
Fascinating.
we're not going to dive into it here, but I'm just saying these are examples of potential ways that people are sort of quote unquote jailbreaking the simulation.
Which, by the way, I fully believe that I think everything that you just said is like, I'm in total agreement.
Okay.
But I've always, it's interesting that you said that because I've always thought that like remote viewing was almost like a way of, you know, if we're going with a hypothesis that this is like in some form of another a simulation, which I think we both agree to some extent. Not necessarily like a system or a computer or anything like that, but like just the way that like everything that we see isn't quite, it's not like there's more to quote unquote reality than we're able to see. I've always thought that like the remote viewing thing, especially like Uri Geller, like the folks like Uri Geller and stuff, where they realize that like, okay, I'm going to remote view a building in, you know, the western part of Russia, yada, yada, yada. And then it kind of got crazier. Oh, well, I'm going to view an area on the moon, or I'm going to view a place on Mars. But then they realized like, oh, well, I'm going to view the USSR back in 1942, a building. And so to me, it's always seemed like kind of like a hack, like you're talking about, but almost like a microfiche version of being able to view the simulation. You know, it's like, it kind of is in a way like, you know, it ties into like the Akashic record and stuff like that, where you're just sort of like thumbing through like, you know, history and time and location, and
You kind of getting the outline details of
right.
I mean, but you know, pretty, I guess, filled in a little bit.
Pretty accurate.
Probably, especially if someone's more tuned into that stuff. And I, you know, to be honest with you, boy, I don't know what to think about it all because there's just so many hacks out there, you know. And it's like, is somebody just making it up? Maybe, but it's also realistic enough for me that I'm not diving into that. Just like a Ouija board, I'm not getting into it, man. Because what if you get trapped? You know, there's always that thing.
Well, my thing that I think is one of the stronger sort of, you know, sort of like parts of this whole thing that kind of give credibility is that idea that like, you know, and you talk about like CRISPR and like AI and all these sort of, you know, modern technologies. But I think like medicine men and like, you know, ayahuasca, you know, DMT, that whole kind of thing. I think it was all doing the same thing. And I think, and we've mentioned this 100 times on the show, but it's that idea that like, you know, you hear Joe Rogan talk about, you know, doing like DMT and stuff and, you know, seeing this sort of, all these like sort of hexagonal patterns and then seeing these like clockwork elves that they've been, you know, sort of like named in the last few years. And it's like every single person for the most part that is doing this thing, they're viewing these exact same kind of things.
Yeah.
And it's like,
for sure.
You know, and we've talked about this, we kind of both agree that like, it's like they're just, suddenly they're able to view sort of the background code or all that hexagonal stuff is maybe like sort of the building blocks or like the foundation on which our reality is sort of like built on, you know?
Yeah.
And it gets interesting because then you start looking at like, especially in like, you know, Indian and sort of Hindu cultures and stuff, you start seeing these like, you know, they're ancient, you know, world builders and stuff. And they have like all of this crazy sort of hexagonal stuff in their architecture. And it's like, wow, are they just like mimicking what they're seeing in these sort of hallucinogenic or meditative states, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating, man.
That's when it starts to get kind of crazy is whenever, just like you said, when they start seeing the same thing, it begs the question, are they describing the same thing? I'm always super interested. I'm most interested, I should say, in the sources that experience these things, having not heard of whatever it is that they're seeing first. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to kind of quantify that,
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be able to prove it. We're just taking their word for it. Yeah. But what's interesting about this guy, though, that guy Yampolskiy or whatnot, he wrote a paper called How to Hack the Simulation. And I'm just going to lay out some bullet points here on his strategies that he talks about in this paper. One of them, or the first one, is something that he calls simulation reconnaissance. And that is to investigate anomalies or patterns like deja vu that might indicate underlying code or system glitches.
Yeah. What do you know when this book was written?
Or paper,
sorry.
Let me see.
Because this is everything that you're talking about, like the sort of the hacking of it and like the sort of synchronicities or deja vu. It's very similar to what our friend Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner talk about with like this thing called synchromysticism. And it's very much in line with just being like hyper aware of like, like the Randonautica app and like that kind of stuff. Like being fully aware of like synchronicities and like these patterns that like repeat and like, oh man, why am I having this deja vu? And the idea that like we're just sort of on this sort of, sort of like Donnie Darko. The thing comes out of his chest and it's like he's just sort of following the path that like the simulation is like set for him.
Yeah. So this was written in 2023. So certainly after Turchin and Renner have been talking about for a while. Let me just read the abstract of the article for those of you that didn't pay attention in science class or haven't read a paper like this. An abstract essentially just kind of boils down the Tyler got the history award. They didn't do abstracts. It boils down like the general sort of idea of the article in full. Well, actually, the full name of the article is Hacking the Simulation from the Red Pill to the Red Team. Many researchers have conjectured that the humankind is simulated along with the rest of the physical universe, a simulation hypothesis. In this paper, we do not evaluate evidence for or against such claim, but instead ask a computer science question, namely, can we hack the simulation? More formally, the question could be phrased as, could generally intelligent agents placed in virtual environments find a way to jailbreak out of them? Given the state-of-the-art literature on AI containment answers in the affirmative, AI is uncontainable in the long term, we conclude that it should be possible to escape from the simulation, at least with the help of superintelligent AI. By contraposition, if escape from the simulation is not possible, containment of AI should be. An important theoretical result of AI safety research. Finally, the paper surveys and proposes ideas for hacking the simulation and analyzes ethical and philosophical issues of such an undertaking. Now, here are some of the other sort of methods to hack. He talks about quantum experimentation, which is utilizing quantum phenomena like entanglement or superposition to probe the simulation's boundaries.
Dude, he's talking about the Randonautica app.
Really? Yeah. And these effects might reveal inconsistencies in the simulated environment, just like you were talking about.
Yep.
There's computational overload, which is execute resource-intensive computations to stress the simulation's infrastructure, potentially causing it to reveal its artificial nature. Now I got to read this whole paper because I want to know what that in detail means.
So like, for example, like the Randonautica app, it's sort of this supposed idea that like if we're in the simulation, like I said with like the Donnie Darko, where it's like, you know what I'm talking about, that scene where like the sort of globule comes out of his chest,
and he kind of realizes that he's
being like led down a
yeah.
And so like Randonautica app, and there's others out there where they utilize like random number generators and stuff like that, is where it's actually really fascinating. And we actually meant to do a show years ago when it first came out. I'm a big fan of this guy named Nick Hinton, and he had a lot to do with like it blowing up. But basically, you kind of set an intention. So it could be random. It could be, okay, well, I'm going to focus on like for example, this is something that my daughters and I did. Of course, Mom was out of town, and I was like, oh, we got this new app. Like, let's check this thing out. And so we were like, okay, we want to see an owl, right? And so we were all like, okay, let's just think about an owl. And you put in this like number generator thing, and then it opens up like a map. And you could do like different versions. So you can do like, it's kind of like reverse weight, kind of like the deal with like the AI lobe thing, where you can do like the reverse of it. You can do non-connective points. I mean, it gets like pretty scientific with like the random number generator, which is actually out of Australia. I think it's like an atomic, generator kind of thing. But you set your intention. Okay, we all want to see an owl, and we did it, and it sets a map. So we're just like driving around, and you can set like, okay, within a mile or so many miles, and it doesn't always work, obviously. But what you're doing is you're hacking it so that by using random number generators, you're doing things that would like take you out of the path of what you would typically do in any given day, right? And so it's like you never would do this unless you're utilizing like something like a random number generator. And so we did it, and we did like, I don't think it worked after that. And I feel like some of it probably has to do with like intention and all that kind of stuff, but it drove us down a road that I'd never driven on, which turned into like this dirt road, which took us into like...
Sounds safe.
Well, it definitely started looking a little shady, and I was like, should I turn around? But then the road dead-ended, and there was a house at the end, which kind of looked abandoned.
This is how a scary movie starts, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
I know. But literally, as I was turning around, I was like, oh, man, didn't really see it. As I'm turning around, my daughter Amelia has her head out the window, and she's like, Dad, there's an owl on the porch. And there it is, wow. This like little ceramic, like, it looked like for folks that live in Georgia, it's like the pottery type.
Well, I'm sure they have pottery owls elsewhere, but
North Georgia, like Sawtee and stuff, like there's a lot of like Medder's pottery. There's like famous like potters.
Brown and it's like earth tones and like blue glaze.
Yeah, but it's like real sort of primitive folk art style. But yeah, sitting on there's like this owl thing. And so, people could say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. That's just whatever. But it's like, I do think there's something to that. And I think you're kind of just leaning in on like these like quote unquote like synchronicities that happen to us where you're like, oh man, I was thinking of this number, and then 5 times today I saw that number again. And it's just like leaning in to like really notice and to like, kind of really go for it. And
I think in a lot of ways,
what the simulation is trying to tell you almost.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, you in doing that the way you did it, you're kind of doing a couple of these bullet points. You're kind of experimenting, kind of probing the boundaries, and then utilizing some of those like simulation reconnaissance and that kind of thing. And another thing it talks about is using AI. It's artificial intelligence deployment to develop super intelligent AI agents tasked with identifying and exploiting the vulnerabilities in the simulation. And then social engineering, which is interesting because that is the attempt to communicate or manipulate entities or NPCs within the simulation that might be connected to the simulators seeking assistance or information. And then the boldest move of all, really, that he talks about is to crash the system. And like I said, in that...
So what does that mean? Like, what does that entail?
Well, he just talks about whether or not... He talks about it more in line with the implications of whether or not you should do so. I don't know that he talks about the how. I'd have to read the whole paper. I just looked it up. It's like 32 pages. But... as I kind of skimmed through it, it looks pretty computer science driven, and my eyes might cross.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it is interesting, though. I mean, like, I love these thought processes that people that are like far more intelligent than we are are utilizing their intelligence to just think beyond the barriers of things and to think beyond sort of like the typical experimentation to prove or disprove or even figure out whether or not you can do these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that you mentioned like NPC, because that's something that we had talked about a while back of doing an episode. We probably will do an episode that's like specifically on this, but
like evidence-based stories.
Yeah. But I do think that's really interesting. That idea that like maybe everybody doesn't have a soul. You know, if you want to look at it, is that?
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure that everybody understands what you say when you say that, because it sounds intense.
They're demons.
You mean everyone that we potentially interact with,
right,
in the world, or maybe not even interact with, but at least adjacently sort of see in our area, might not be, because it's just, like everybody doesn't have a soul. Sounds kind of intense.
Well, no. So what I mean is like,
We will return after these messages.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures
from another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
This is Joshua Cutchin, and you're at my home for weirdness. That would be rad.
You have your quote unquote like main characters, right? But then if we believe that it is and I keep saying that just to, make sure everybody understands, but it's like, if we're of the belief that there is the simulation, that simulation is also generating non-player characters or NPCs or, almost to sort of enrich the background of our reality where if, does that mean that like, okay, if we walk into a store and there's all these just sort of random folks just sort of milling around, like in a video game, they're sort of like, there's always like sort of the glitch guy who just continues to walk into the wall, but it's like, and a lot of it stems from like, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right.
And it's like, is this something that's kind of being, or these people sort of being generated just to sort of fuel the belief in the reality? So like when we walk out of the store, do those people still exist? And I know it's like a really abstract kind of crazy concept, but I have always thought it was really interesting, that idea that like a few years ago at this point, there was a study done where they took like a batch of people, and something like 60% of them they didn't have like internal dialogue when they had like internal thoughts, which is so bizarre to me.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? And then they also
you're saying like people, like when they're thinking, they don't hear their own voice.
They don't hear their own voice. They don't hear, there's not like an internal, like your internal person like talking.
Yeah, let's put it out on the table right now too. I certainly do. And
I 100% do.
Yeah. I'd be interested in anyone listening. Do you have that internal dialogue, even like when you're thinking throughout the day, or like when you're reading? Right. That's another thing. When I'm reading, I'm hearing the voice.
Well, and there was also a study group of people where they did another survey where they would say, okay, you would say the word apple, right? And you had a percentage of people who could like perfectly picture an apple, like right in their minds, and then other people had no ability of doing that whatsoever. They didn't see an apple in their mind when you said apple. They know what an apple is, but they didn't. There's no detail. There's nothing red or green in their mind that's picturing an apple, and I find that wild too. And so, a lot of people at the time were like, "Man, does this is this sort of sort of something that sort of bolsters that NPC theory. You know, it's like, are these people just, and when I say they don't have a soul, I mean, that sounds a little...
Boy, especially if somebody out there is the one that doesn't hear the voice, they're like, wow, okay, I came away with a couple things today from this episode. One, I don't have it. Turns out I don't have a soul.
Yeah. But I do think it's a really interesting thing. It's like, you know, are they sort of operating on a much lower, not necessarily like a worse level, or like, oh, they're not as smart or something.
Just
but
digging a hole.
Yeah, no, I definitely am. But it's like, are they operating on like a much lower level so that they're just kind of like existing?
Man, it's just not going good. Any way you slice this, it's not going good,
man.
I don't know if you're asking me.
But does that make sense to you? Like, do you see what I'm saying? As far as
yeah, maybe I would say it a little differently. Mm-hmm. I might say it as maybe those folks haven't begun to tap into that awareness that others have, but then also at the same time existing in this world, there are folks that you know, might just be out there that we don't know, that aren't listening to the show, that you know, just are NPCs.
Yeah.
You know.
So what we're really asking, and this is for Clay, is do androids dream of electric sheep?
There you go.
That's what Philip K. did.
Yeah. So anyways, where does it leave us, you know? It is another one of those topics and episodes where we're kind of left with more questions than we have answers. But the reason why I wanted to bring it to the show and also to everyone's attention and talk about it is the second that I saw those titles, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to read these articles. And I read them. And I just think it's fascinating that there are people out there, like I said, who are really pushing the boundaries of thought and really pushing the boundaries on, well, I mean, it does beg the question, if it is potential, if there is potential to break it, do you break it? Or do you just become aware of it? And then once you're aware of it, do you just then have to break it, or does it just automatically break? My point is this.
Oh, because like you're already just...
you're already breaking it because you're thinking about it, and it's just going to break anyway. Yeah. Even without, quote, effort. And then as technology, because like if we were having this conversation in the 90s, it would still be just as thought-provoking, but we wouldn't have the potential capability to utilize higher, you know, computing things such as like AI or even just a computer in general that is as strong as the ones that we have now. And arguably in 50 years, those abilities of computing are going to be even greater. And so does that increase the likelihood of it just breaking everything up, you know? And is that what we're kind of seeing in our reality? Things feel chaotic. And is that because these experiments are happening outside our sort of known, you know, because before I read these articles, I didn't know who any of these people were. As many times as we've talked about these things, they never popped up, you know? Right. And so these things are happening. People are experimenting with it. Is that why we feel like, oh, yeah, you know what I mean?
Well, I also think that's there's something to be said about this, you know, things like spooky action at a distance or the double slit experiment. I think that idea of like a non-localized consciousness does kind of, to me, it definitely helps sort of on the belief that there's like a type of like simulation, you know what I mean? So for example, I ran across this article and I think it's kind of fascinating, and it really sort of gives more credence to this idea of like a non-localized sort of intelligence or consciousness. So there was a French man in 2007 that was published in The Lancet, and it just totally puzzled, you know, any of the researchers. And basically this guy goes in, a 44-year-old man from France, started experiencing weakness in his leg. He went to the hospital. That's when doctors told him that he was missing most of his brain. The man's skull was totally full of liquid with just a thin layer of brain tissue left. The condition is known as hydrocephalus, which you've heard us talk about. But, I mean, the dude lived a completely normal life. He had a full family. He worked. They tested his IQ, in which he was like just a little bit under the normal range, you know. But he's not like a dumb, you know, there's no mental
Yeah, he wasn't like a
issues.
vegetable or something.
Yeah. No, and or even any sort of, slight, no sort of mental decline whatsoever, except just under like a little under the normal range. A guy named Axel Clearmans, who is a cognitive psychologist at a university in Brussels, when he learned about the case, he just couldn't believe it, and he immediately kind of sort of glommed onto this thing, and ever since he's done like testing and even up until like in the last few years. But dude, you can look at these photos of this dude's brain, and it's like completely gone. There is nothing in there except water.
Wow.
And so, we talk about like spooky action at a distance. It's like a theory that Einstein had. And it's that idea that like if like thought, or if something is moving in one place, with like the double slit experiment, you're also seeing the same thing happen like at another location. Like if a photon moves here, but there's like intention and thought, and that also ties into what's called the observer effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this guy, it's like, is the brain just like some sort of receiver? Like, so everything that we've thought thus far, it's like, oh, everything belongs in our brain, and it's sort of the control mechanism for our bodies, for everything else. But it's like, this dude's missing over 90% of his brain, and still completely living a normal life.
Right.
So, it's kind of strange. But also, is this guy an NPC?
I mean, it's just, I know one of the things I say all the time is it's just bizarre, and it is. But it's fun to think about, and ultimately, like, I want it, to me, out of all of it, it's a great explanation on dreams,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that some of those dreams could be other sort of lifetimes, and that, that I talked about at the top of the show. I love that thought. And at the same time, it's scary. We all have the ability to create things at our fingertips, either using AI or even just like on our own, creating a character, creating a story. It's just wild, man.
Well, before we wrap up, I made some notes, and this was a while back actually, but I think it's really interesting that this idea of the simulation is typically viewed, and I think it's, like I said before, it's because of, the Matrix. But I just wanted to show a few examples of like that this is like such an old school thought. You have Sartre and like Socrates, I think, therefore I am. But in like the ancient Hindus, they say that life is an illusion, and that they're living in a simulation that's formed in the mind of Brahman. He dreams in code because it's almost half computer, half human. The ancient Chinese, in 370 BC, a guy by the name of Zhuang Zhou said, "Once upon a time, I was a butterfly. Suddenly, I awoke, and I was a man." So it's unknown if I dreamed being a butterfly, or I'm a butterfly dreaming of being a man. Only after the Great Awakening will we all realize this was a great dream, and that only fools believe that they are awake. And so I just think, like, I don't know, it's just such amazing. A fascinating thing. Yeah.
It also just, it's awesome because it makes you think about people who have either been categorized as spiritual leaders or categorized as prophets and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe makes you question, like, wow, maybe they were tapped into something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's wild.
100%.
Anyway, man, I thought it was, some fun things to bring up, and I'm glad that we talked about it today. I hope you guys listening enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And yeah, man.
Yeah. And if you have your own thoughts on the simulation, or you're an NPC, feel free to hit us up over on Instagram. Leave us a comment, jump in those threads. If it's more long form, leave us a DM or shoot it over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. If it goes beyond that and you have your own urban legend, you have your own sort of localized mythology that hasn't really made its rounds on the internet yet that you would like to tell us, that's the stuff we love. And if you're brave, you can leave that on a voice memo over at thatwouldberadpodcast.com. To us, that's the best way to do it because you can possibly become a part of That Would Be Rad history and show up on a future episode with, cool sound design and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, we love to hear from you guys. We love to hear, stories, your urban legends that are like in your area, your own personal sort of paranormal encounters or any of this kind of stuff, or, really any kind of thoughts on it. If you have the time, it makes a world of difference. Go leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're using. Tell a friend about the show. If you want to support the show financially, the best way to do that is over on our Patreon, the Rabbit Trail. It's just the best way that, you can kind of show your support to keep the lights on. And I guess that's about it. We got anything else, Woody?
I think that's it, man.
Right on. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. Time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.
That's when it...
right.
I couldn't shoot. Oh, I don't know how you held it together the whole time, but man.
No, I refused to look at it while I was talking. It just kept going like... And I'm like, oh, here's
pictures of this guy throwing up.
Dude, he looks just like our favorite guy. What's his name?
You.
No. The comedian.
Tim Robinson.
Yeah, Tim Robinson.
Oh, man. Okay, hold on.
Shh.